The vet's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Lily Winter's tear-streaked face as she cradled the aging German shepherd's head in her trembling hands. Blood, too much blood, matted his once lustrous coat. "Stay with me, Shadow," she whispered. "Not like this. Not today." The technicians worked frantically around them, monitors beeping in protest as Shadow's pulse weakened. His amber eyes, clouded now with age and pain, found hers with the same unwavering trust they'd held for 20 years. "This dog saved a child today," the paramedic had told the veterinary staff. "Pushed her clear of a truck. Shouldn't have been possible with his condition." But Lily understood. Shadow had always been impossible gloriously, stubbornly impossible ever since that summer afternoon when an 8-year-old girl and a wounded warrior had found each other at the edge of a dried-up creek bed. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Oak Ridge, Kentucky wasn't the kind of place that made the news. A drowsy town of 4,000 souls nestled between rolling hills and sprawling horse farms. It was the sort of community where folks still brought casseroles when someone fell ill, and children played outside until the streetlights flickered on. Most families had lived there for generations, their histories intertwined like the roots of the ancient oak trees that gave the town its name. 8-year-old Lily Winters was something of an anomaly. She and her mother Caroline had moved to Oak Ridge just 3 years prior, after Caroline accepted a position as head nurse at the county hospital. They'd settled into a modest craftsman with a wraparound porch on Sycamore Street, where Caroline worked double shifts to keep the mortgage paid, and Lily spent hours on the porch swing with her nose buried in books. Lily was small for her age, with honey-blonde hair that refused to stay in its braids and a smattering of freckles across her nose. What she lacked in size, she made up for in spirit, a quality her grandfather had always admired. Grandpa Joe had lived with them until last Christmas, when cancer finally claimed him after a long battle. His absence left a cavernous hole in their small family, especially for Lily, who had spent countless hours listening to his stories while he whittled figurines on the porch. "Always stand up for what's right, Lily Pad," he'd told her just days before he passed. "Even when your knees are shaking." 2 streets over lived Frank and Martha Jenkins, whose farmhouse sat on the last remaining agricultural plot within town limits. Frank raised horses and kept a small flock of chickens that provided eggs for half the neighborhood. Their German shepherd, Shadow, was something of a local celebrity after he'd fought off a coyote that threatened the farm, suffering a severe injury to his hind leg in the process. The Jenkins had plastered the town with flyers when Shadow went missing during his recovery, relief washing over the community when he was found days later. Hungry, but alive. The summer of 2003 was unusually hot, even by Kentucky standards. As June melted into July, the creek beds dried up, the grass turned brittle, and the children of Oak Ridge sought respite anywhere they could find it. For Lily, that meant the air-conditioned sanctuary of the public library, where the summer reading program offered escape from both the heat and the quiet house that still echoed with her grandfather's absence. The morning sun already blazed overhead as Lily set out for the library, her canvas backpack stuffed with returned books weighing heavily on her narrow shoulders. Caroline had left for the early shift at the hospital, pressing a kiss to Lily's forehead and leaving lunch money on the counter with a note reminding her to be home before dark. The Oak Ridge Summer Reading Challenge was in its 3rd week, and Lily was determined to claim the grand prize, a gift certificate to Paulson's bookstore and her name engraved on the library's golden plaque. Rather than taking the long way around on the sidewalks, Lily opted for her favorite shortcut through Oak Ridge Park. The path dipped down into what was usually Willow Creek, now nothing more than a dry, rocky bed bordered by thirsty trees. The parched earth crunched beneath her sneakers as she navigated the familiar route, mentally rehearsing her book report on Bridge to Terabithia that she planned to share at today's reading circle. The sound reached her before the scene came into view, harsh laughter punctuated by a pained yelp that raised the hair on Lily's arms. She froze at the bend in the creek bed, her heart hammering against her ribs as she peered around the trunk of a massive sycamore. In the wide clearing where the creek normally pooled into a swimming hole, 4 boys had formed a loose semicircle around a large, cowering shape. Lily recognized Tyler Matthews immediately. His father owned Matthews Motors, the largest car dealership in 3 counties. And Tyler made sure everyone knew it. At 13, he towered over most of the kids at Oak Ridge Middle School, his growth spurt having arrived early alongside a cruel streak that the adults seemed determined to ignore. Flanking him were Jason Donahue, Connor Willis, and Bryce Parker boys who orbited Tyler like satellites, reflecting his malice back at the world. "He can't even run," Tyler laughed, tossing a jagged rock from hand to hand. "Some guard dog." The shape shifted, and Lily's breath caught in her throat. It was Shadow, the Jenkins German Shepherd, his normally proud posture reduced to a trembling crouch. His hind leg was still wrapped in a medical bandage, now dirty and partially unraveled. Dark patches of dried blood stained his golden-brown fur, and fresh red droplets spattered the dusty creek bed beneath him. "My dad says they should have put him down after the accident," Bryce added, selecting a stone from the ground. "What good is a 3-legged dog, anyway?" "He's still got all 4 legs, dummy," Jason corrected, landing a punch on Bryce's arm. "It just doesn't work right anymore." Lily watched in horror as Connor hurled a rock that struck Shadow's injured leg. The dog yelped, trying desperately to scramble away, but the steep embankment of the dried creek bed trapped him against the earth. His amber eyes, intelligent eyes that Lily had often admired when Mrs. Jenkins brought him to the Sunday farmers market, darted frantically between the boys, searching for escape. Those eyes locked with Lily's for a brief, electric moment. In them, she saw not just pain and fear, but something that pierced her 8-year-old heart like an arrow dignity. Even cornered, even wounded, there was a nobility to Shadow that his tormentors couldn't touch. It reminded her of Grandpa Joe in his final days, how he'd maintained his gentle humor and kindness even as his body failed him. "Watch this," Tyler called, hefting a larger stone. "Bet I can make him howl." The rock flew from Tyler's hand with practiced precision, striking Shadow's ribs with a sickening thud. The German Shepherd didn't howl instead. He made a sound Lily would never forget, a low moan of such profound suffering that it seemed to vibrate through the dry earth beneath her feet. Something inside Lily shifted then, like tectonic plates rearranging themselves beneath the surface of her being. Grandpa Joe's voice echoed in her mind. "Sometimes the only thing standing between cruelty and innocence is one person willing to step forward." Before she could second-guess herself, Lily stepped out from behind the sycamore. "Stop it!" Her voice cracked with emotion, but carried clearly in the still summer air. "Leave him alone." Four heads swiveled toward her in unison, expressions ranging from surprise to annoyance. Shadow's ears perked forward, his eyes following this unexpected intervention. "Well, look who it is," Tyler drawled, recognition dawning on his face. "The bookworm from Sycamore Street. What are you going to do? Read us to death?" The other boys snickered, but Lily noticed how Shadow had fixed his gaze on her, watching, waiting, perhaps understanding more than anyone might expect from a dog. His tail, normally a proud plume, gave a single, tentative wag. In that moment, standing at the edge of the dried-up creek with her heart thundering in her chest, Lily Winters made a choice that would alter the course of many lives, most immediately her own and that of the wounded shepherd watching her with those intelligent amber eyes. Lily's mouth went dry as four pairs of eyes fixed on her. She'd never been the center of attention, quite the opposite. At school, she was the quiet girl who always had her hand raised but spoke so softly. Teachers often asked her to repeat herself. Now, standing alone against four boys nearly twice her age, she felt her courage wavering like a candle flame in the wind. "I said leave him alone," she repeated, her voice steadier this time. She took a tentative step forward, sliding down the gentle slope of the embankment, sending small pebbles skittering ahead of her. Tyler Matthews crossed his arms, a smirk playing at his lips. "Or what you gonna tell your mommy on us?" He made his voice high and mocking. "Oh, Mrs. Winters, the big mean boys were throwing rocks at a stupid dog." The other boys laughed on cue, though Lily noticed Jason shifting uncomfortably, glancing between her and Shadow. "He's not a stupid dog," Lily said, taking another step closer. "He's a hero. Everyone knows he saved the Jenkins farm from that coyote. That's how he hurt his leg." "Some hero," Connor snorted. "Can't even save himself now." Shadow watched the exchange with unnerving focus, his ears moving to track each voice. Despite his obvious pain, he'd managed to pull himself into a more dignified position, his injured leg awkwardly extended to the side. "Heroes get hurt sometimes," Lily said, thinking of the stories Grandpa Joe had told her about his time in Vietnam. "That doesn't make them any less brave." Tyler's expression darkened. He was used to deference from children Lily's age fear. Even her defiance pricked at something dangerous in him. "Your grandpa filled your head with a bunch of nonsense, didn't he?" Tyler said, his voice suddenly cold. "My dad says your grandpa was just a crazy old man who couldn't even remember his own name at the end." The casual cruelty of the words stole Lily's breath. Grandpa Joe's decline had been mercifully brief, but seeing his sharp mind falter in those final weeks had been devastating. That Tyler would use this against her felt like a violation of something sacred. "Don't talk about my grandpa," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Tyler sensed weakness and pressed his advantage. "What are you going to do about it? He's dead. Cancer ate him up from the inside. My dad said. Probably couldn't even recognize you toward the end." Lily's hands balled into fists at her sides. The tears spilled over now, tracing hot trails down her cheeks. But something else was rising beneath her grief, a fierce, protective anger that burned away her fear. "My grandpa was worth 10 of you," she said, her voice clear despite her tears. "And he would have protected Shadow, just like I'm going to." With that, Lily stepped directly between the boys and the wounded German shepherd. She felt Shadow's warm breath against the back of her legs, heard the soft whine that escaped him. without looking back. She spread her arms wide, making herself as large a shield as her small frame would allow. "You'll have to go through me first," she declared. For a moment, silence hung in the dried creek bed. Even the cicadas seemed to pause their summer chorus. Tyler's face flushed red, then paled. He was suddenly aware of the lines being crossed. A teenager threatening a little girl was different from boys tormenting a stray dog, but pride kept him from backing down completely. "You think I won't?" he challenged, though his voice had lost some of its conviction. Behind Lily, Shadow struggled to his feet. Despite his injury, despite his weakness, the German shepherd positioned himself at Lily's side. A low growl rumbled from his chest, not aggressive, but clear in its intent. They stood together now, girl and dog united against cruelty. United. "Just leave him alone," Lily said again. "Please." Tyler's jaw worked as he wrestled with his options. Backing down meant losing face in front of his friends, but continuing meant crossing a line even he recognized as dangerous. "Fine," he finally spat. "Keep the stupid crippled mutt. He's boring anyway." He bent down and picked up a final rock larger than the others, with jagged edges that caught the sunlight. For a terrible moment, Lily thought he meant to throw it at her face. Instead, he hurled it with vicious force at Shadow. Lily reacted without thinking. She twisted her body, arms outstretched to protect Shadow's head. The rock struck her shoulder with stunning force, tearing through her t-shirt and into the soft flesh beneath. Pain exploded through her arm and chest, bright and immediate. She cried out, stumbling backward. Shadow lunged forward with a ferocity that belied his injuries, placing himself between Lily and the boys. His teeth were bared, hackles raised along his spine, his growl now a full-throated snarl of warning. "Holy shit," Bryce whispered, backing away. "Tyler, man, you hit her. You actually hit her." Blood bloomed across Lily's shirt, staining the fabric a deep crimson. The sight of it seemed to break some spell. Jason turned and scrambled up the embankment without a word. Connor followed a moment later. "Tyler, come on," Bryce urged, tugging at his friend's arm. "This is bad. We gotta go." But Tyler stood frozen. The color drained from his face as he stared at the blood spreading across Lily's shoulder. For a flickering instant, something like remorse crossed his features. Then a new voice shattered the moment. "What in God's name is going on here?" Howard Reeves, a retired Marine who lived in the blue house at the edge of the park, stood at the top of the embankment. His weathered face was a thundercloud of anger as he took in the scene: the injured dog, the bleeding girl, the boys with rocks still in their hands. "Mr. Reeves," Tyler stammered, I can see exactly what you were just doing." Mr. Reeves cut him off, already making his way down the slope with surprising agility for a man in his 60s. "Tyler Matthews. I've known your grandfather since before you were born, and he would be ashamed to see this." Tyler and Bryce exchanged panicked glances before turning and fleeing up the opposite side of the creek bed, leaving Lily, Shadow, and Mr. Reeves alone in the clearing. Mr. Reeves knelt beside Lily, his expression softening as he gently examined her shoulder. "That's going to need stitches, young lady. Let's get you some help." He glanced at Shadow, who had positioned himself protectively at Lily's side despite his own injuries. "Both of you, The emergency room at Oak Ridge County Hospital buzzed with its usual Wednesday afternoon activity farmers with minor injuries from machinery, elderly patients with heat exhaustion, and the occasional tourist who'd taken a tumble at nearby Cumberland Falls. But when Howard Reeves walked through the automatic doors with a bloodied 8-year-old girl in his arms and a limping German shepherd padding faithfully behind them, the usual hum of conversation ceased. "My God! Lily!" Caroline Winters dropped the chart she'd been reviewing and rushed forward, her nurse's composure momentarily shattered by the sight of her daughter's blood-soaked shirt. "What happened?" "Some boys were throwing rocks at the Jenkins dog," Mr. Reeves explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Your daughter decided to put herself between them." Caroline's eyes darted to Shadow, who stood trembling beside Mr. Reeves, his bandaged leg barely touching the ground, fresh wounds visible on his golden coat. Despite his own injuries, the dog's attention remained fixed on Lily, his amber eyes watchful and concerned. "Someone call Frank Jenkins," Caroline instructed a nearby orderly as she guided Mr. Reeves toward an examination room. "And page Dr. Mitchell. My daughter needs stitches." "The dog can't come in here," the charge nurse began, but Caroline silenced her with a look that brooked no argument. "That dog stays with my daughter," she said firmly, "just until his owner arrives." In the small examination room, Caroline's professional demeanor returned as she carefully cut away Lily's ruined shirt and examined the jagged gash on her shoulder. "You're going to need at least 6 stitches, sweetheart," she said softly. "And you'll have quite a bruise." Lily nodded, her face pale but composed. "Is Shadow okay?" she asked, glancing at the German shepherd, who had settled at the foot of the examination table, his muzzle resting on his paws but his eyes never leaving her. Mr. Reeves knelt beside Shadow, gently examining the dog's fresh injuries. "He's got some new cuts and bruises, and I think his leg wound might have reopened, but nothing life-threatening. He's tough. This one." Dr. Mitchell arrived moments later, a kind-faced woman with silver-streaked hair who had been Lily's pediatrician since they moved to Oak Ridge. She assessed the wound with practiced efficiency while listening to Mr. Reeves' account of what had happened. "You stood up to Tyler Matthews and his gang?" Dr. Mitchell asked, impressed as she prepared a local anesthetic. "That was very brave, Lily, and very dangerous. Grandpa Joe always said you should protect those who can't protect themselves." Lily replied, wincing slightly as the needle pierced her skin. "Shadow couldn't run away because of his hurt leg." Dr. Mitchell nodded thoughtfully as she began the careful work of stitching the wound. "Your grandfather was a wise man. I miss seeing him at church picnics. He made the best apple butter in the county." She paused, her hands steady as she worked. "But I think he'd also want you to be careful about putting yourself in harm's way." "I didn't think they'd actually hit me," Lily admitted quietly. "I thought they'd stop." From his position by the door, Mr. Reeves made a sound somewhere between a grunt and a sigh. "Bullies rarely stop unless they're made to," he said. "I've called Sheriff Collins. Those boys won't get away with this." The examination room door opened, and Frank Jenkins appeared. His weathered face creased with concern. The 60-year-old farmer removed his cap as he entered, nodding respectfully to Caroline and Dr. Mitchell before his gaze settled on Shadow. "There you are, old boy," he said softly, kneeling despite his arthritic knees. Shadow raised his head but didn't move from his position near Lily. Frank looked up at the little girl on the examination table, his eyes bright with emotion. "Martha's beside herself with worry about Shadow and about you. Miss Lily, we had no idea he'd gotten out of the yard again. He was down in the dry creek bed," Lily explained as Dr. Mitchell finished the last stitch. "Tyler and his friends were throwing rocks at him because he couldn't run away." Frank's weathered face darkened. "The Matthews boy I should have known. That young man's been trouble since he could walk." He looked at Mr. Reeves. "Howard, you said the sheriff's been called. He'll meet us at your place once we're done here." Mr. Reeves confirmed. "I saw enough to make a statement, and Lily can fill in the details if she's up to it." Dr. Mitchell finished bandaging Lily's shoulder and stepped back to assess her work. "You'll need to keep this clean and dry for at least a week. Lily, no swimming, which I know is tough news in this heat." She turned to Caroline. "She should take it easy for a few days. The impact was significant. There might be some deep tissue bruising." Caroline nodded, smoothing Lily's tangled hair with a gentle hand. "She'll be staying home with me tomorrow. I've already asked Diane to cover my shift." As they prepared to leave, an unexpected complication arose. Shadow, who had remained calm throughout the examination, refused to follow Frank Jenkins out of the room. Each time his owner moved toward the door, the German shepherd would rise as if to follow, then stop and look back at Lily with such evident distress that even Dr. Mitchell noticed. "I've never seen him behave like this," Frank said, confusion evident in his voice. "Shadow, come on, boy. We need to get you to Dr. Lewis to check that leg." But Shadow merely whined softly, moving to press himself against Lily's legs as she stood beside the examination table. Caroline and Frank exchanged looks over Lily's head. "Why don't you both come with us to the vet?" Caroline suggested. "It might help Shadow stay calm, and Dr. Lewis should take a look at those new injuries anyway." The veterinary clinic was only 2 blocks from the hospital. A tidy brick building with a fenced yard where recovering animals could get fresh air. Dr. Lewis, a tall woman with a perpetual sunburn across her nose, examined Shadow while Lily sat cross-legged on the floor beside the examination table, one small hand resting on the dog's uninjured flank. "The original surgical site has been aggravated," Dr. Lewis confirmed, probing the hind leg gently. "And he's got some nasty new contusions and lacerations, but considering what he's been through, he's in remarkably good shape." She looked at Lily with newfound respect. "Mr. Reeves tells me you put yourself between Shadow and those boys. That took real courage." Lily shrugged her uninjured shoulder, suddenly shy under the veterinarian's praise. "I just didn't want them to hurt him anymore." "Well, your intervention probably prevented much worse injuries," Dr. Lewis assured her. "I'll need to clean these wounds and rebandage his leg, but he should be fine with proper rest." She hesitated, glancing at Frank. Although, with his attachment to Lily, separation anxiety might be an issue for a while. Frank Jenkins removed his cap again, twisting it in his weathered hands. "About that," he said slowly. "Martha and I have been meaning to talk to you. Caroline, you know we're moving to Arizona next month. Frank Jr. finally convinced me to retire and help him with his horse breeding operation out there." Caroline nodded. The Jenkinses' upcoming move had been a topic of conversation at church socials for weeks. Our new place is a senior community, no pets over 20 pounds. Frank continued. We've been worried sick about what to do with Shadow. Our son's allergic, and none of our friends can take on a dog his size, especially one with special needs while his leg heals. He looked at Shadow, who had relaxed under Lily's gentle touch, his eyes half closed in contentment despite the veterinarian's examination. I've never seen him bond with anyone like this, not since we got him as a pup. Caroline's eyes widened as she realized where Frank was heading. Are you suggesting, would you consider adopting him? Frank asked directly. Martha and I would cover his medical expenses for the leg. Of course. And if it doesn't work out, we'd make other arrangements before we leave. But seeing them together, he gestured to Lily and Shadow. Caroline looked at her daughter, whose face had lit up with a hope she hadn't seen since before Grandpa Joe's illness. For months. Lily had moved through life as if walking underwater, going through the motions, but somehow muted, diminished by grief. Now, sitting beside this injured dog who had already claimed a piece of her heart, she looked fully present for the first time in too long. We'd need to discuss this as a family, Caroline said carefully. Our yard isn't fenced, and I work long hours. I'll walk him every day, Lily promised immediately. And I can feed him and brush him and make sure he takes his medicine. Please, Mom, please. Shadow, as if sensing the pivotal moment, raised his head and looked directly at Caroline. There was something in those amber eyes, an intelligence, a dignity that gave her pause. This wasn't just any dog. This was an animal who had protected his family, who had endured abuse without becoming vicious, who had recognized the goodness in her daughter and responded to it. Let's try a trial period, Caroline suggested. Shadow can stay with us while his leg heals, and we'll see how it goes before making any permanent decisions. The relief on Frank's face was evident. That's more than fair. Martha will be over the moon. She's been sick with worry about finding him a good home. The next morning, Sheriff Collins sat at the Winters kitchen table, his notebook open as Lily recounted the events at the creek bed. Shadow lay at her feet, his freshly bandaged leg stretched out beside him, his body positioned so that he maintained contact with Lily's ankles at all times. "And you're certain it was Tyler who threw the rock that hit you?" the sheriff asked, his expression grave. Lily nodded. He aimed it at Shadow. But I moved to block it. Sheriff Collins made another note before closing his book with a sigh. I've already spoken with Mr. Reeves and the other witnesses. The Matthews boy admits to throwing rocks at the dog, but claims hitting you was an accident. It was, Lily said quietly. He didn't mean to hit me. He meant to hit Shadow. The sheriff's weathered face softened at her honesty. That's still assault, Lily, and animal cruelty is a serious offense, even for juveniles. He turned to Caroline. The boys will face consequences through the juvenile system. Given Tyler's previous run-ins and the severity of this incident, the judge will likely assign significant community service at minimum. After the sheriff left, Caroline found Lily on the back porch, reading aloud from Charlotte's Web while Shadow dozed beside her, his large head resting in her lap. He likes when I read to him, Lily explained, looking up from her book. Grandpa Joe did too. Caroline settled into the porch swing beside them, careful not to disturb Shadow. Lily, about what happened yesterday. I know I should have gotten an adult, Lily interrupted, her expression suddenly anxious. I know it was dangerous. But there wasn't time. Mom, they were hurting him right then. I was going to say I'm proud of you, Caroline corrected gently. Not for putting yourself in danger, that part terrified me. But for standing up for someone who needed help, even when it was scary. That took real courage. Lily's small face brightened. Like Grandpa Joe in Vietnam, when he carried his friend even though he was hurt too. Exactly like that. Caroline wrapped an arm around her daughter's slim shoulders. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you are afraid. The next 2 weeks established a new rhythm in the Winters household. Shadow's physical recovery progressed steadily under Dr. Lewis's care, but it was his emotional transformation that most amazed Caroline. The once proud but traumatized dog blossomed in Lily's gentle company. His nightmares, which had manifested as whimpering, twitching episodes during his first few nights with them, gradually subsided. He began to hold his tail higher, to engage playfully with Lily in the backyard despite his limited mobility. For her part, Lily had found a purpose that filled the void left by Grandpa Joe's passing. She researched German Shepherds at the library, created a detailed care schedule that she posted on the refrigerator, and spent hours each day either reading to Shadow or gently exercising his injured leg as Dr. Lewis had demonstrated. Word of Lily's brave intervention spread through Oak Ridge with the efficiency of small-town gossip. Neighbors stopped by with dog treats and casseroles. Lily's classmates, previously indifferent to the quiet bookworm, now regarded her with a mix of awe and curiosity. Even Mrs. Abernathy, the formidable librarian, bent the rules to allow Shadow to accompany Lily to the summer reading challenge meetings, provided he remained on his special therapeutic mat beside her chair. The most surprising development came 3 weeks after the incident, when Martha Jenkins arrived at their door with a rectangular package wrapped in brown paper. "Frank and I want Lily to have this," she explained as Carolyn invited her in. "It just seems right, considering." Inside was a hand-carved wooden sign that read "Shadow's Home" in elegant, burned lettering, with a perfect silhouette of a German Shepherd beneath the words. "Frank made it years ago when Shadow was just a puppy," Martha explained, her eyes misting as she watched Shadow greet her with a gentle nudge of his nose. "We always said Shadow would tell us when he found where he truly belonged. Seems like he's done just that." By the time school resumed in August, the decision had been made official. Shadow would remain with Lily and Caroline permanently, with the Jenkins visiting whenever they returned to Kentucky to see old friends. A sturdy fence now enclosed the Winters' backyard, funded by an anonymous donation that Caroline strongly suspected came from Howard Reeves. On the first day of school, Lily approached the bus stop with Shadow limping faithfully at her side. Dr. Lewis had cleared him for short walks, and Caroline had arranged with the school for Shadow to accompany Lily to the property line before returning home with her. The usual cluster of children parted as they approached, whispers following in their wake. Shadow stayed close to Lily's left side, his body language alert but calm. The change in both of them was remarkable. Lily stood taller, more confident, while Shadow carried himself with renewed dignity despite his permanent limp. As they reached the edge of the group, a familiar figure stepped forward. Tyler Matthews, his summer tan faded, stood awkwardly before them. The court had assigned him 200 hours of community service at the county animal shelter, a sentence that had made him the subject of considerable gossip. "Hi," he said, his voice cracking slightly. I, uh, I made something. For the dog. For Shadow." He held out a small leather collar charm, hand-tooled with Shadow's name and a small shield design. "Mrs. Peterson at the shelter taught me how to make them," he explained, not quite meeting Lily's eyes. "I'm really sorry. About everything." Lily studied him for a long moment, her hand resting protectively on Shadow's head. The German shepherd watched Tyler without aggression, but with clear recognition. "You can give it to him yourself," Lily finally said, her voice quiet but steady. "If he'll take it from you." It was a test, and everyone knew it. Tyler swallowed hard, then knelt slowly, holding the charm in his open palm. "Hey, Shadow," he said softly. "I made this for you. I'm sorry I hurt you." Shadow looked up at Lily, as if seeking permission. At her slight nod, he stepped forward and carefully sniffed Tyler's outstretched hand. The bus stop fell silent, every child holding their breath. After what seemed an eternity, Shadow gently took the charm from Tyler's palm, then stepped back to Lily's side. "I think that means he accepts your apology," Lily said simply. As the school bus appeared around the corner, an invisible weight seemed to lift from the gathering. Shadow's forgiveness, and by extension. Lily's had shifted something fundamental in the hierarchy of Oak Ridge Elementary's third-grade class. It wasn't the end of Tyler's redemption journey, nor was it the final chapter in Shadow's recovery. But it was a beginning of something new, something that had started with a small girl's courage in a dried-up creek bed and would continue to ripple outward in ways none of them could yet imagine. 3 years passed in the gentle rhythm that defines childhood in small towns, seasons changing, children growing taller, dogs growing grayer around the muzzle. Lily Winters had blossomed from a shy 8-year-old into a confident 11-year-old with strong opinions and a reputation for standing up for underdogs. Shadow, now 8, had adapted remarkably to life with his permanent limp, his dignity intact despite the awkward gait that marked his movements. The scar on Lily's shoulder had faded to a thin silver line, visible only when she wore summer dresses, though she never seemed self-conscious about it. "Battle scars are nothing to be ashamed of," she'd once told a curious classmate. "My grandpa had them, Shadow has them, and now I have one too." Oak Ridge itself remained largely unchanged, insulated from the rapid development consuming nearby communities. The town's resistance to change was a point of pride for many residents. Why fix what wasn't broken? But change, as it always does, eventually came knocking. On a crisp September morning, Caroline called Lily into the kitchen, where the local newspaper lay open on the table. "You should see this," she said, pointing to an article on the front page. "Developer purchases Oak Ridge Park property, luxury homes planned." Lily skimmed the article, her brow furrowing as she absorbed the implications. Matthews Development Corporation, owned by Tyler's father. Richard Matthews had purchased the 14 acres encompassing Oak Ridge Park from the cash-strapped county government. Plans included 30 executive homes and a private clubhouse with swimming pool. Construction was scheduled to begin in January, with the first homes available by summer. "But that's the park," Lily said, looking up at her mother in confusion. "They can't just take the park away." Caroline sighed, pouring herself another cup of coffee. Apparently they can, according to the article. The county's been losing money maintaining it for years. The sale will fund renovations to the elementary school and repair the community center's roof. Shadow padded into the kitchen. Sensing Lily's distress, he pressed his graying muzzle against her hand in silent solidarity. "But that's where everyone plays," Lily protested, "and where the summer festival happens, and—" She trailed off, her gaze dropping to Shadow. "That's where we found each other." Caroline nodded, understanding the deeper significance. Oak Ridge Park wasn't just a public space. It was the setting for a pivotal moment in their lives. The dried-up creek bed, where Lily had first shielded Shadow from harm, had become a place they visited often, a physical reminder of courage and connection. "There's a town meeting tomorrow night," Caroline said, tapping the newspaper. "The council wants to hear community feedback before approving the final zoning changes." Lily straightened, a familiar determination settling across her features. "Then we need to go. People should know what they're losing." The Oak Ridge Community Center was packed the following evening. Folding chairs had been arranged in neat rows facing a long table where the 5 town council members sat with expressions ranging from resignation to discomfort. At a smaller side table sat Richard Matthews in an expensive suit, flanked by a woman with a sleek laptop and a man with architectural renderings mounted on foam board. Lily and Caroline found seats near the back, alongside Frank and Martha Jenkins, who had returned from Arizona for their annual visit. At 11, Lily was one of the few children present, drawing curious glances from adults who recognized her as the girl who saved the Jenkins dog. Mayor Abigail Peterson called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of her gavel. "We're here tonight to discuss the proposed development of the Oak Ridge Park property," she began, her voice carrying efficiently through the room. "As many of you know, the County Commission approved the sale last month after determining that maintenance costs had become prohibitive." A murmur of discontent rippled through the crowd. "However," the mayor continued, raising her voice slightly, "final zoning approval requires town council consent, which is why we're soliciting community input before our vote next week." Richard Matthews rose to speak, his confident smile never reaching his eyes. "Thank you, Mayor Peterson. I know change can be concerning for a close-knit community like Oak Ridge. That's why Matthews Development is committed to creating a neighborhood that enhances property values while preserving the natural beauty that makes this area special." He gestured to the architectural renderings. "Our plan includes green space between homes, preservation of mature trees where possible, and a community clubhouse that will host events previously held in the park. Additionally, we're pledging $1 million towards school improvements and infrastructure upgrades." As he spoke, Lily studied the renderings with growing dismay. The their creek bed, was nowhere to be seen, replaced by uniform houses with circular driveways. The ancient oak trees that had provided shade for generations of picnickers had been reduced to decorative landscaping around a gate-controlled entrance. When the floor opened for public comment, a parade of residents approached the microphone. Several business owners spoke in favor of the development, citing increased property values and potential new customers. Others expressed concerns about traffic, overcrowding at the school, and the loss of the town's only significant public green space. Lily listened intently, Shadow's leash wrapped around her wrist. He sat beside her chair, unusually still, as if understanding the gravity of the proceedings. When Martha Jenkins nudged her gently, Lily realized the time for hesitation had passed. "I'd like to speak," she said, raising her hand. Mayor Peterson spotted her and nodded. "Lily Winters, isn't it? Come on up, dear." The walk to the microphone seemed endless. Lily could feel dozens of eyes tracking her progress, including those of Richard Matthews, whose expression remained pleasantly neutral despite the whispers that followed her. Shadow limped faithfully beside her, his nails clicking against the linoleum floor. Standing before the microphone, Lily suddenly felt the full weight of her youth. The council members regarded her with benevolent smiles, clearly not expecting substantive input from a child. Richard Matthews had already turned to whisper something to his assistant. Lily took a deep breath and thought of Grandpa Joe. "My name is Lily Winters," she began, her voice surprisingly steady in the large room. "And this is Shadow. 3 years ago, I found him in the creek bed at Oak Ridge Park, surrounded by boys who were throwing rocks at him because he couldn't run away." The room stilled. The story was well known in Oak Ridge, part of the local lore now, but hearing it directly from Lily brought a fresh poignancy. Shadow had been hurt saving his family's farm from a coyote, but those boys didn't care. They just saw something weaker than them that they could hurt for fun. Lily paused, gathering her thoughts. "I tried to stop them, and I got hurt too. But Mr. Reeves found us, and Shadow came to live with me. And now we're family." She looked down at Shadow, who gazed up at her with complete trust, his tail sweeping gently across the floor. "I know that's just one story, but Oak Ridge Park is full of everyone's stories. It's where Mrs. Abernathy holds the summer reading picnics. It's where Coach Taylor taught my friend Zach how to throw a football after his dad left. It's where the Jenkins family has hosted the Easter egg hunt for 40 years. Lily turned to face the audience rather than the council. "If you build houses there, you're not just taking away trees and grass. You're taking away the place where our community makes memories, where we become a community in the first place." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "I collected signatures from kids at school, 143 of them. We can't vote yet, but the park belongs to us too, maybe even more than to the grown-ups, because we're the ones who use it every day." Unfolding the paper, Lily placed it carefully on the edge of the council table. "My Grandpa Joe used to say that the measure of a town isn't in its buildings or businesses, but in how it treats its most vulnerable citizens. That includes its children, its elderly residents, and yes, even its injured dogs." A soft chuckle rippled through the audience, breaking the tension slightly. "Please don't take our park away," Lily concluded simply. "Not all treasures can be measured in dollars." As she turned to return to her seat, the audience erupted in applause. Caroline's eyes shone with pride as Lily and Shadow made their way back through the crowd, accepting pats on the shoulder and murmured words of support. The meeting continued for another hour, with opinion clearly divided between economic interests and preservation. As people began to disperse, Lily noticed a familiar figure standing awkwardly near the exit. Tyler Matthews, now 16 and nearly unrecognizable from the cruel 13-year-old who had tormented Shadow. His community service at the animal shelter had evolved into a part-time job that he'd maintained for 3 years, much to everyone's surprise. "That was a good speech," he said, as Lily approached. "You always were good with words." Shadow regarded Tyler with the cautious acceptance he'd developed over years of occasional encounters. The German Shepherd no longer showed fear around the teenager, though he maintained a dignified reserve. "Thanks," Lily replied. "But I don't think it will make any difference. Your dad seemed pretty set on his plans." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, he usually gets what he wants." He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "But he doesn't know about the salamanders." "What salamanders?" "The eastern hellbender. They're endangered, and there's a population in that creek. I found them last summer when I was collecting water samples for Mr. Peterson's biology class." Lily's eyes widened. "And endangered species could stop the development. It could at least force them to change the plans," Tyler confirmed. "But my dad would kill me if he knew I told you. He's already mad that I'm working at the shelter instead of learning the family business." The tension between them softened slightly, mutual understanding passing between former adversaries now united by a common cause. "Why are you telling me this?" Lily asked. Tyler looked at Shadow, then back to Lily. "Because you were right. That day in the creek bed, and tonight too. Sometimes the most important things aren't the ones with price tags." He started to leave, then turned back. The university research team confirmed the salamander habitat last month. The report's public record at the county environmental office. Just thought you should know. As Tyler disappeared through the exit, Lily felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Howard Reeves, his hair now completely silver but his posture still military straight. "That was quite a speech, young lady," he said with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Reminded me of your grandfather." "Joe always did know how to cut through nonsense and get to the heart of matters." "Thanks, Mr. Reeves. But I don't think it was enough. Mr. Matthews has already bought the land." The older man's smile turned shrewd. "Perhaps, but purchases can be undone. Plans can be changed, and communities can rally when properly motivated." He gestured toward the exit where Tyler had departed. "Interesting conversation you had there." Lily looked up sharply. "You heard, 'My hearing may not be what it once was, but I caught enough. Endangered salamanders. Was it?'" Mr. Reeves chuckled. "Your grandfather and I served together. Did you know that in Vietnam, he saved my life once, just like you saved Shadow's? The Winters family has a habit of standing up when others won't." He patted Shadow's head gently. "I think this fight is just beginning, Lily. And if you're willing to lead it, you might find you have more allies than you realized." As they left the community center, the autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Shadow pressed close to Lily's side, a warm, steady presence that had become as essential to her as breathing. The park stretched before them in the gathering dusk, ancient oaks silhouetted against the purple sky, the dry creek bed winding like a scar through the heart of the land. "We're not giving up," Lily whispered to Shadow, her hand finding the soft fur behind his ears. "This is our place. We found each other here." The German shepherd looked up at her with those wise amber eyes, and in them, Lily saw not just understanding, but determination, the same quiet courage that had sustained him through pain and recovery, now reflected back at her when she needed it most. The weeks following the town meeting unfolded in a flurry of activity. Armed with Tyler's information about the endangered salamanders, Lily and Caroline visited the county environmental office, where a sympathetic clerk helped them locate the university research report. The eastern hellbender population in Oak Ridge Creek wasn't just significant, it was one of the largest documented colonies in the state, a biological treasure hidden in the modest waterway that meandered through the park. Howard Reeves connected them with an environmental attorney who agreed to work pro bono, filing temporary injunctions that would at least delay construction until proper impact studies could be completed. The local newspaper ran a front-page story featuring Lily and Shadow standing beside the creek bed. The headline reading, "Local Girl Fights to Save Park and Rare Salamanders." Richard Matthews responded with predictable corporate strategy public statements about commitment to environmental stewardship while privately pressuring council members to expedite approvals before the salamander issue gained more traction. The battle lines were clearly drawn, with the community increasingly polarized between economic development and conservation. Through it all, Shadow remained Lily's constant companion, his steady presence a reminder of why the fight mattered. Each evening they walked through the park, tracing familiar paths that might soon disappear beneath bulldozers and concrete foundations. The German shepherd, despite his permanent limp, still carried himself with dignified grace, though Lily couldn't help noticing that his muzzle grew a little grayer each month, his movements a touch slower after particularly active days. It was during one of these evening walks, 2 days before the crucial council vote, that disaster struck. The November air held the sharp edge of approaching winter as Lily and Shadow made their way along the creek bed, now partially filled with water after recent rains. Fallen leaves created a kaleidoscope of amber and crimson beneath their feet. Lily had been explaining her latest strategy to Shadow, a petition drive at the upcoming Harvest Festival, when the German shepherd suddenly froze, his ears perked forward in alert attention. "What is it, boy?" Lily asked, following his gaze toward a stand of sycamores at the curve of the creek. Shadow gave a low whine, then lurched forward with unexpected urgency, pulling the leash from Lily's unprepared grasp. He bounded ahead with surprising speed for a dog his age, his awkward gait not hampering his determination. "Shadow, wait!" Lily called, breaking into a run after him. As she rounded the curve, Lily saw what had captured Shadow's attention, a small child, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, balancing precariously on the slippery rocks that formed a natural crossing point in the creek. The recent rains had raised the water level, turning the usually gentle stream into a swift current that swirled menacingly around the child's rubber boots. "Don't move!" Lily shouted to the child, who looked up with startled eyes, teetering dangerously. Shadow reached the creek's edge first, barking sharply to attract the child's attention. When the little girl turned toward the sound, her foot slipped on the wet stone. With a frightened cry, she tumbled sideways into the churning water. Without hesitation, Shadow plunged into the creek, powerful front legs propelling him through the current. His injured hind leg trailed awkwardly behind him, but his determination never faltered. He reached the thrashing child and maneuvered himself alongside her, providing a floating anchor she could grasp. Lily splashed into the water from the opposite bank, the cold stealing her breath as she waded toward them. Together, she and Shadow guided the sobbing child to shore, where they collapsed in a shivering heap on the rocky bank. "You're okay now," Lily reassured the little girl, whose name she learned was Maddie Peterson, the mayor's granddaughter. "Shadow's got you. You're safe." But even as she spoke the words, Lily noticed something was wrong. Shadow had stretched out on the ground, his breathing labored, his eyes glazed with pain. When she reached to stroke his wet fur, he whimpered softly. An uncharacteristic sound from the stoic shepherd. Shadow. Lily's voice cracked with sudden fear. What's wrong, boy? The German shepherd tried to rise but collapsed immediately, his hind leg completely unresponsive, his chest heaving with exertion. A look of profound apology filled his amber eyes as he rested his muzzle on Lily's knee. "Help!" Lily screamed toward the park entrance, where a woman was already running toward them, presumably Maddie's mother or caretaker. "My dog needs help, please." The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Mr. Reeves, who had been walking nearby, helped carry Shadow to Caroline's car. They rushed to the emergency veterinary clinic 1 town over, Shadow's breathing growing more labored with each passing mile. "His heart is giving out," Dr. Marshall explained gently after the initial examination. The strain of the rescue, combined with the cold water and his age, the exertion was simply too much. "But you can help him, right?" Lily pleaded, her clothes still damp from the creek, her face pale with fear. "He's strong. He's always been strong." Dr. Bowe. Marshall's expression softened with compassion. "We're doing everything we can, Lily. Shadow is indeed strong. He's survived injuries that would have defeated many dogs. But he's also 8 years old, with a significant disability that's put extra strain on his heart for years." Caroline wrapped an arm around Lily's shoulders, her own eyes bright with tears. "What are his chances, Doctor?" she asked quietly. "The next 24 hours will be critical," Dr. Marshall replied. "We've stabilized him for now, but he'll need specialized care. There's a canine cardiologist in Louisville who might be able to help, but—" She hesitated, glancing at Caroline. "The treatment would be expensive." Caroline finished for her, understanding the unspoken concern. Dr. Marshall nodded. "Very. We're talking several $1,000s, with no guarantee of success." Lily looked up at her mother, a desperate plea in her eyes. "Mom, we have to try. It's Shadow. He saved that little girl. He saved me." Caroline pulled Lily close, her mind racing through their limited options. The nurse's salary that supported them comfortably enough for daily life couldn't stretch to cover specialized veterinary treatment. The house needed a new roof, and Lily's braces were scheduled for next spring. The modest savings account Caroline had carefully built since Grandpa Joe's death wouldn't cover even half of what Shadow might need. "We'll figure something out," she promised, hoping her voice conveyed more confidence than she felt. "Shadow's family. We don't give up on family." They were allowed to see Shadow briefly before leaving. The German shepherd lay on a treatment table, an IV line delivering fluids and medication, monitoring equipment beeping steadily beside him. Despite his condition, Shadow's tail thumped weakly against the table when he saw Lily, his eyes brightening momentarily. "You have to fight, Shadow," Lily whispered, gently stroking the gray fur around his muzzle. "Please fight. I can't lose you too." Shadow responded with a soft whine, then lifted his head just enough to lick Lily's hand once, before exhaustion reclaimed him. In the car, heading home, Lily stared silently out the window at the passing darkness. "It's not fair," she finally said, her voice small but fierce. "He was just helping someone. He was being brave." Caroline reached across to squeeze her daughter's hand. I know, sweetheart. Life isn't always fair. But Shadow's a fighter. Just like you are. The town meeting is in 2 days, Lily said suddenly. The vote about the park. Caroline nodded, confused by the apparent change of subject. Yes, but don't worry about that now. Shadow needs our focus. But that's just it, Mom. The park is Shadow's place, our place. How can we let them destroy it while he's fighting for his life, especially after he just saved the mayor's granddaughter there? Despite her worry, Carolyn couldn't help smiling at her daughter's passionate determination, so like Grandpa Joe's, so like her own at its core. One battle at a time. Lily, first, we make sure Shadow gets the care he needs. Then we'll deal with the park. As they pulled into their driveway, Caroline's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Dr. Marshall. Shadow holding steady, resting comfortably, will update hourly. A small mercy, Carolyn thought, sharing the message with Lily. But as they entered the quiet house, Shadow's absence was a palpable void. His bed in the corner of the living room, his leash hanging by the door, his water bowl in the kitchen, each sight was a painful reminder of how thoroughly the German Shepherd had woven himself into the fabric of their lives. Lily disappeared into her room without dinner, emerging later with red-rimmed eyes and Shadow's favorite toy, a well-worn plush squirrel clutched to her chest. She curled up on the couch beside Caroline, her expression far older than her 11 years. What if he dies? Mom, she asked, her voice barely audible. What if he dies thinking we abandoned him at the vet's? Caroline pulled her daughter close, wishing she could shield her from this pain as easily as she'd once bandaged scraped knees and kissed away tears. Shadow knows we love him, Lily. He knows we're fighting for him just as hard as he's fighting for himself. Grandpa Joe said dying is just part of living, Lily murmured. But I didn't think Shadow would have to face it so soon. Not after everything he's already been through. As midnight approached, Caroline's phone buzzed again. Dr. Marshall's update was less encouraging. Shadow experiencing arrhythmia, condition downgraded to critical. Specialist consultation recommended ASAP. Caroline stared at the message, her heart sinking. Without the specialist, Shadow's chances were rapidly diminishing. With Lily finally asleep on the couch, Caroline allowed herself a moment of quiet grief, the tears she'd been holding back for her daughter's sake finally spilling over. Oh, Joe, she whispered to her late father-in-law, I wish you were here. You'd know what to do. The house creaked softly in response, the familiar sounds of home offering no solutions, only witness to her sorrow. Morning arrived with cruel brightness, sunlight streaming through windows left uncurtained in the previous night's distress. Lily woke on the couch, momentarily disoriented before memory crashed back with devastating clarity. Caroline was already in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and urgent. Yes, Dr. Marshall. I understand. We'll be there as soon as possible. She turned to find Lily standing in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, eyes questioning. Shadow made it through the night, Caroline explained, offering the positive news first. But his condition hasn't improved. Dr. Marshall says we need to make some decisions today. About the specialist? Lily asked. Caroline nodded, pouring coffee into a travel mug with hands that weren't quite steady. And about other options if we can't afford the specialist. She didn't elaborate, but Lily was old enough to understand the implication. "We're not giving up on him," Lily stated, the tremor in her voice belying her resolute words. "No, we're not," Caroline agreed. "But we need to be realistic about our resources. Honey, the treatment Shadow needs is very expensive." Before Lily could respond, a knock at the front door interrupted them. Caroline frowned, checking her watch, barely 7:30, too early for casual visitors. On the porch stood Howard Reeves, his silver hair neatly combed despite the hour, his weathered face grave. "Sorry to come by so early," he said, as Caroline invited him in. "Heard about Shadow from Pete at the Animal Control office. How is he?" "Hanging on," Caroline replied, offering coffee that Howard declined with a wave of his hand. "The whole town's talking about what happened," Howard continued, settling onto a kitchen chair. "Mayor Peterson's been calling everyone. Her granddaughter Maddie hasn't stopped talking about the hero dog who saved her." Lily, who had been hovering in the doorway, stepped forward. "Shadow is a hero. He didn't even hesitate. He just jumped right in to help her." Howard nodded solemnly. "That's what I came to talk about. There's a special emergency session of the town council this morning. Mayor Peterson called it last night. Seems her perspective on the park development has shifted considerably since her granddaughter's rescue." Caroline and Lily exchanged glances. Under normal circumstances, this would be tremendous news for their preservation efforts. But with Shadow fighting for his life, the park battle had temporarily receded in importance. "That's good to hear," Caroline said carefully. "But right now we're focused on getting Shadow the care he needs. The veterinary specialist in Louisville might be able to help, but—" She trailed off, uncomfortable discussing financial constraints in front of her daughter. Howard's shrewd eyes missed nothing. "That's the other reason I'm here. There's someone who wants to help with Shadow's medical expenses." He turned toward the open front door and made a beckoning gesture. Tyler Matthews stepped hesitantly onto the porch, his tall frame awkward with tension. At 16, he bore little resemblance to the cruel child who had tormented Shadow years ago. His face had thinned, revealing cheekbones that hinted at the man he would become, and his previously sneering expression had been replaced by one of careful thoughtfulness. "May I come in?" he asked, voice deeper than Lily remembered. Carolyn glanced at Lily, silently deferring to her daughter's comfort level. After a moment's hesitation, Lily nodded. Tyler entered but remained standing, too restless to sit. "I heard about Shadow last night. My boss at the shelter called me." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable but determined. "I've been saving money from my job for 3 years. It was supposed to be for a car when I turn 18, but I want you to have it. For Shadow's treatment." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and placed it on the kitchen table. "It's almost $4,000. Mr. Reeves says the specialist might cost more, but maybe this will help." Lily stared at the envelope, then at Tyler, struggling to reconcile this gesture with her lingering memories of the boy who had hurled rocks with such casual cruelty. "Why would you do that?" she asked finally. "You don't even like Shadow." Tyler flinched slightly at her directness. "That's not true. Not anymore." He hesitated, then continued with evident difficulty. "Working at the shelter changed me. Seeing how animals forgive and adapt. even after people have been horrible to them. It made me think about what I did, what I was becoming." He glanced at Howard, who nodded encouragingly. "The truth is, I've been trying to make amends for years. The leather collar tag was just the beginning. I've been donating half my paycheck to Shadow's medical fund at Dr. Lewis's office since I started working." "What medical fund?" Caroline asked, confused. Howard cleared his throat. "I set it up after the original incident. Several folks in town contribute. The Jenkins send something every month from Arizona. I put in a little from my pension. Martha from the bakery adds something whenever she can. It's been covering Shadow's checkups and medications." Carolyn sank into a chair, overwhelmed by this revelation. "All this time, I had no idea." "That was the point," Howard said gently. "You and Lily had already done so much, taking Shadow in when he needed a home. The fund was our way of supporting that kindness." Lily looked at Tyler, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time. "You've been helping Shadow in secret for 3 years." Tyler nodded, his expression solemn. "After what I did, it seemed like the least I could do. When I heard he collapsed saving Maddie Peterson," he swallowed hard. "Shadow deserves a chance. Please take the money." Caroline reached for the envelope with trembling fingers. "Tyler, this is your car fund, your future. Are you absolutely certain?" "I'm certain," he replied without hesitation. "Besides, my dad has plenty of money. He just wants me to earn things myself, to build character." His mouth twisted into a sardonic smile. "I think this builds more character than buying some used car." "Speaking of your father," Howard interjected, "he's going to be at the council meeting this morning. 7 members of the Environmental Commission showed up at his office yesterday with copies of the Salamander report and documentation of Shadow's rescue. The timing couldn't be better to push for park preservation." Lily's eyes widened. "You think we could actually save the park?" "I think Shadow may have done more than save Maddie Peterson," Howard confirmed. "But we need you there. Lily, the council needs to hear from you again." Caroline shook her head. "We need to get to the veterinary clinic. Shadow is our priority right now. I've already called Dr. Marshall," Howard revealed. "She's arranging transport for Shadow to Louisville as we speak. The specialist can see him today if we hurry." He glanced at his watch. "The council meeting is at 9. We could attend briefly, then head straight to Louisville afterward." Tyler stepped forward. "I can drive you all to Louisville after the meeting. My dad won't miss the car for 1 day." He paused, then added quietly, "I'd like to help, if you'll let me." Caroline looked to Lily, who stood frozen in indecision, the weight of 2 urgent missions pressing upon her 11-year-old shoulders. "What do you think?" "Lily, it's your call." Lily closed her eyes briefly, remembering Shadow's unwavering courage, how he had never hesitated to protect what mattered, regardless of personal cost. Shadow would want to save the park, she said finally. He would understand. Within the hour, they were seated in the community center, which had filled to capacity well before the emergency session began. News of Maddie Peterson's rescue had spread through Oak Ridge with the efficiency of small-town networks, amplified by the existing controversy over the park development. The atmosphere crackled with tension and anticipation. Mayor Peterson called the meeting to order, her usually composed demeanor softened by evident emotion. "Before we begin official proceedings, I want to acknowledge what happened yesterday at Oak Ridge Creek. My granddaughter Maddie would not be here today if not for the intervention of a very special dog named Shadow and his equally special owner, Lily Winters. Murmurs rippled through the audience as Mayor Peterson continued. For those who haven't heard, Shadow, despite his own disability, jumped into the swollen creek to save Maddie when she fell in. In doing so, he suffered a severe cardiac event and is currently fighting for his life. The mayor's voice wavered slightly. As both a grandmother and a public servant, this incident has forced me to reconsider my position on the proposed development. Sometimes it takes a child and a dog to remind adults of what truly matters in a community. Richard Matthews sat stiffly at the side table, his expression carefully neutral, though his clenched jaw betrayed his tension. Tyler, seated beside Lily and Caroline, kept his eyes fixed forward, deliberately avoiding his father's gaze. After preliminary statements from the Environmental Commission and Parks Department, the floor opened for public comment. To everyone's surprise, the first person to approach the microphone was Frank Jenkins, who had flown in from Arizona overnight after hearing about Shadow's condition. "Martha and I raised Shadow from a pup," he began. His weathered face creased with emotion. "He saved our farm from predators, and yesterday he saved a child in the very spot where he himself was once victimized. If that don't tell you something about the character of this community and the importance of that park, I don't know what would." One by one, residents approached the microphone, sharing stories of what the park meant to them. The narrative had shifted dramatically. No longer was this simply about property values or tax revenue. It had become a referendum on community identity and values. When Lily's turn came, she stood tall despite her exhaustion, the weight of Shadow's absence beside her almost palpable. 3 years ago in Oak Ridge Park, I learned what courage looks like, she began, her voice clear despite her youth. Not from adults or books, but from an injured dog who refused to let cruelty define him. She glanced at Tyler, then continued. Since then, I've learned that redemption is possible, that forgiveness can heal old wounds, and that sometimes the most important things in life can't be measured in dollars or square footage. The council chamber fell silent as Lily described Shadow's rescue of Maddie Peterson, her words painting a vivid picture of selfless heroism. Right now, Shadow is fighting for his life because he put someone else's safety above his own comfort. He's never stopped protecting what matters, even when it cost him dearly. She turned to face Richard Matthews directly. "Mr. Matthews, your development would destroy the creek where Shadow saved your business partner's granddaughter yesterday. It would eliminate the habitat of endangered salamanders. But most importantly, it would erase a place where this community has created memories for generations." Lily's final words resonated through the hushed room. If a dog with 3 good legs and a damaged heart can find the courage to protect what matters, surely we can too. 7 years passed, as they tend to do in small towns, not in dramatic leaps but in the gentle accumulation of seasons, celebrations, and shared stories that form the tapestry of community life. Oak Ridge changed too, though not in the ways Richard Matthews had once envisioned. The park remained, protected now by a conservation easement that designated it as public land in perpetuity. The creek bed where a frightened dog and a brave girl had once found each other was marked by a modest bronze plaque. Its simple inscription, "Courage has no size limit," a quiet reminder of beginnings. On a bright May morning, 18-year-old Lily Winters sat cross-legged on the porch swing of the house on Sycamore Street, a thick envelope in her hands still unopened. Beside her, An elderly German shepherd dozed in the dappled sunlight, his once golden coat now predominantly gray, especially around his muzzle. At 15? Shadow moved slowly, his permanent limp more pronounced with age, but his amber eyes retained their remarkable intelligence and dignity. "Should I open it, boy?" Lily asked, running her fingers through the soft fur behind his ears. Shadow's tail thumped against the porch boards in lazy acknowledgement. After his cardiac event 7 years ago, the specialist in Louisville had performed a delicate procedure to repair a congenital defect exacerbated by years of compensating for his injured leg. The recovery had been lengthy, but Shadow had approached rehabilitation with the same quiet determination that characterized everything he did. He'd never regained his full strength, and certain medications remained a permanent fixture in his routine. But he'd been granted years that had once seemed impossible. The town council meeting that had saved Oak Ridge Park had also marked a turning point for Shadow's care. Richard Matthews, faced with overwhelming community opposition and the emotional weight of Maddie Peterson's rescue, had made a surprising announcement at the conclusion of Lily's speech. Matthews Development would withdraw its proposal for residential construction and instead donate the already purchased land back to the county with funds for ongoing maintenance, provided it was named Shadow's Park and included a dedicated area for therapy dog training. "My son Tyler has shown me the importance of second chances," Richard had said, his voice uncharacteristically humble, "and the value of investing in things that can't be bought or sold." The canine cardiology specialist who saved Shadow's life became a regular visitor to Oak Ridge, establishing a satellite clinic that served working dogs and pets from 3 counties. The initial treatment, that had seemed financially impossible, was covered by a combination of Tyler's savings, the secret medical fund Howard Reeves had established, and a matching donation from Matthews Development's charitable foundation. The envelope in Lily's hands represented the culmination of those 7 years, her future taking shape in response to the past. The University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine was her top choice. Their specialized program in rehabilitation medicine perfectly aligned with her aspirations. "Here goes nothing," Lily murmured, carefully breaking the seal. Shadow lifted his head, seeming to sense the moment's importance. His cloudy eyes focused on Lily's face with the unwavering attention that had never diminished with age. The first word Lily saw upon unfolding the letter was, "Congratulations," and her breath caught in her throat. She read quickly, then again more slowly, absorbing the details: full acceptance, partial scholarship, fall enrollment. "We did it, Shadow," she whispered, leaning down to press her forehead against his. "We really did it." The screen door creaked open as Caroline stepped onto the porch, still wearing scrubs from her overnight shift at the hospital. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked, nodding toward the letter in Lily's hands. Lily nodded, tears of joy threatening to spill. "I got in. With a scholarship." Caroline's tired face bloomed into a smile as she settled onto the swing beside her daughter. "Of course you did. Dr. Peters has been singing your praises since you started volunteering at the clinic, and that essay you wrote about Shadow and rehabilitation medicine was extraordinary." Shadow shifted position to rest his head on Lily's knee, a gesture of solidarity he'd perfected over years of shared triumphs and disappointments. Lily stroked his graying muzzle, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them here, from a terrified 8-year-old and an injured dog to a future veterinarian and her loyal companion. "Have you told Howard yet?" Caroline asked. "He'll be thrilled." Lily shook her head. I wanted you and Shadow to be the first to know, but I'll tell him at the ceremony this afternoon. The ceremony Caroline referenced was the annual dedication at Shadow's Park, marking the anniversary of Maddie Peterson's rescue and the community's decision to preserve the land. What had begun as a small gathering had evolved into one of Oak Ridge's most cherished traditions, a celebration of community, conservation, and courage that drew visitors from neighboring towns. This year held special significance. The therapy dog training area, which had started as a simple fenced field, had blossomed into a full-fledged program under the guidance of an unexpected director, Tyler Matthews, whose part-time job at the animal shelter had evolved into a career in animal rehabilitation. The program paired at-risk youth with rescue dogs, teaching both patience and trust through structured training activities. Today marked the graduation of their largest class yet. At 30, Tyler had grown into a thoughtful, dedicated young man whose gentle guidance transformed both the troubled teenagers and damaged dogs entrusted to his care. His father, initially skeptical of this career path, had become the program's most generous donor after witnessing its impact on the community. The toxic relationship between father and son had slowly healed, though Tyler maintained a modest lifestyle far removed from his family's wealth. Living in a small cabin at the edge of the park where he could remain close to the animals in his care. As the afternoon approached, Lily changed into a simple sundress, carefully attached Shadow's special harness designed to provide support for his weakened hindquarters on longer walks, and drove them to the park in her grandfather's restored pickup truck, a high school graduation gift from Caroline that connected her to Grandpa Joe in a tangible way. The park buzzed with activity when they arrived. Colorful tents dotted the central meadow, local vendors offering everything from lemonade to handcrafted dog toys. Children darted between exhibits on local wildlife, their excited voices carrying on the spring breeze. The creek, once dry and neglected, now flowed clear and healthy, its banks stabilized by native plants, its waters home to the eastern hellbender salamanders that had become unofficial mascots of Oak Ridge's conservation efforts. Howard Reeves, now in his 70s but still ramrod straight in posture, greeted them near the ceremony area. "There's our girl of honor," he said, bending slightly to ruffle Shadow's ears with affection. "And the most distinguished dog in 3 counties. Shadow accepted the attention with characteristic dignity, his tail sweeping slowly in recognition of an old friend. The bond between the retired Marine and the German Shepherd had deepened over the years, with Howard often dog-sitting when Lily's academic commitments took her away from home. "Save that girl of honor business for Maddie Peterson," Lily demurred. "She's the one giving the keynote speech today." Howard chuckled. "Maddie's certainly grown into quite the young lady. 12 years old and already talking about environmental law. Her grandmother couldn't be prouder." His shrewd eyes noted the envelope peeking from Lily's purse. "Is that what I think it is?" Lily nodded, unable to contain her smile. "Penn Vet, full acceptance, partial scholarship." Howard's weathered face crinkled with pleasure as he pulled her into a quick, fierce hug. Joe would be busting his buttons with pride, seeing the woman you've become. "I know I am." The mention of her grandfather still brought a bittersweet ache, even after all these years. "I wish he could have met Shadow," Lily said softly. "They would have understood each other." "Oh, I think they know each other just fine." Howard replied with the quiet certainty of a man who had seen enough of life and death to form his own conclusions about such matters. Some bonds transcend the usual limitations. The ceremony began with Mayor Peterson, now in her final term, welcoming the gathered crowd. The years had softened her once severe appearance, though her voice remained clear and authoritative as she recounted the park's near loss and miraculous preservation. What we celebrate today is not just the conservation of land, though that achievement shouldn't be minimized, she said. We celebrate the preservation of community identity, the understanding that who we are is intimately connected to the places we cherish and protect. From her seat in the front row, Lily felt Shadow stir beside her. Despite his age and the warmth of the day, the German shepherd sat attentively, his ears perked forward as if understanding every word. His presence beside her had been the one constant in a life marked by typical transitions, elementary to middle school, childhood to adolescence, high school to the cusp of college. Through it all, Shadow had adapted alongside her, his steadfast loyalty never wavering despite the physical challenges that accumulated with his advancing years. Maddie Peterson approached the microphone next, no longer the frightened 4-year-old who had tumbled into the creek, but a poised young girl with passionate convictions about environmental stewardship. She spoke eloquently about the interconnectedness of community welfare and natural preservation. Wisdom beyond her years, shining through carefully prepared remarks. "Before I close," Maddie said, "I want to acknowledge someone special in the audience today. When I was little, I made a mistake that could have cost me my life. A very brave dog named Shadow jumped into the creek to save me, even though he was already injured from saving someone else years before." She turned toward Lily and Shadow, her expression solemn. "Thank you for sharing your hero with me." The crowd's applause washed over them as Lily blinked back unexpected tears. Shadow accepted the recognition with characteristic composure, though Lily felt him press slightly closer to her side, perhaps sensing her emotion. Tyler Matthews took the stage next, his easy confidence with the crowd a stark contrast to the awkward teenager he'd once been. "Today we celebrate another milestone for our therapy dog program," he announced. 7 graduating teams of youth handlers and their canine partners, all of whom have completed over 500 hours of training together. One by one, the teenage handlers led their dogs to the stage, a diverse collection of rescue animals transformed by patience and positive reinforcement. Each teen spoke briefly about their experience in the program, many crediting it with profound personal transformation. "Before I introduce our final graduate," Tyler continued, "I want to acknowledge the inspiration behind this entire program. 15 years ago, I was a very different person, angry, cruel, and heading down a destructive path. My encounter with Shadow and Lily Winters could have remained simply a shameful chapter in my past. Instead, it became the catalyst for change." He gestured toward Lily and Shadow in the front row. "Shadow taught me that resilience doesn't require bitterness, that strength can coexist with gentleness, and that second chances are sacred opportunities. Lily showed me that courage often comes in unexpected packages, and that standing up for what's right matters, especially when it's difficult." The final graduate Tyler introduced was a 17-year-old named Marcus, whose troubled history included juvenile detention before the therapy dog program offered an alternative path. The transformation in the young man was evident as he led his canine partner, a 3-legged pit bull mix, rescued from a fighting operation through a flawless demonstration of obedience and agility exercises. Echo here had every reason to hate humans, Marcus explained to the audience. Just like I had every reason to keep making bad choices. But Mr. Matthews taught us both that our past doesn't have to define our future. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd dispersed toward the refreshment tents, Lily found herself surrounded by a small gathering of the people who had shaped her journey: Caroline, Howard, the Jenkins who still visited annually from Arizona, and Tyler, whose friendship had evolved from tentative reconciliation to genuine respect. "To Shadow," Frank Jenkins proposed, raising a cup of lemonade and toast. The best dog a family could ask for, even if he ended up with a different family than the one that raised him. "And to Lily," Tyler added, "who showed a mean kid that there was a better way to be in the world." Shadow, drowsing now in the afternoon warmth, opened one eye at the sound of his name. His tail swept once against the grass, acknowledging the tribute in his characteristically understated way. Later, as twilight softened the edges of the day, Lily and Shadow made their familiar circuit of the park's perimeter. The German shepherd moved slowly but deliberately, pausing occasionally to rest, but always eager to continue. At the creek crossing where Maddie had fallen and Shadow had made his heroic rescue, Lily stopped to let him drink from the clear water. "We've come a long way, haven't we, boy?" she murmured, watching as ripples spread from Shadow's gentle lapping. In the fading light, with the sounds of the departing celebration behind them and the first evening stars appearing overhead, Lily felt a profound sense of completion, not of ending, but of cycles properly fulfilled. The frightened 8-year-old who had stood trembling before bullies had grown into a young woman confident in her purpose. The wounded dog who had cowered in a dry creek bed had become a community icon of courage and resilience. As they turned toward home, Shadow pressed against Lily's leg in a gesture as familiar as her own heartbeat. Some bonds, formed in moments of courage and sustained through years of mutual growth, transcend ordinary explanation. They simply are as necessary as air, as enduring as the ancient oaks that had witnessed their beginning and now sheltered their journey forward. In the distance, the lights of Oak Ridge twinkled like earthbound stars, calling them home. Life's most profound lessons often come from the most unexpected teachers. In our story of Shadow and Lily, we're reminded that courage isn't measured by size or strength, but by the heart's capacity to stand firm when it would be easier to retreat. For those of us who've witnessed the changing landscapes of our communities and our lives, who've felt the bittersweet passage of time in our bones, this tale resonates deeply. It speaks to our desire to leave behind something meaningful, whether it's standing up for what's right, offering second chances to those who've lost their way, or simply showing kindness when the world has turned cruel.